joining us. We have Arash Yaqin, National Security Analyst, and Ralph Schoellhammer, a visiting fellow at the MCC Budapest. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight in the studio.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we are looking at the EU parliamentary elections. We are looking at Mr. Orban and the Fidesz party, and we are learning that potentially, according to some voices and some commentators, they could be losing some seats when it comes to the elections. Obviously, Mr. Orban chose a tactic of presenting this choice to his voters in Hungary as choice between peace and war. Do you think that this will have an effect on the final outcome of this upcoming EU parliamentary election in Hungary?
Maybe start with, let's start with Arash, excuse me, perhaps. Sorry about that.
I think it's, no problem. I think it's quite kind of ironic that the topic peace and war is coming subject of the national election, because what usually normally was, and all these years, other type of internal issues was there always was part of disinformation and misinterpretation of election between political parties. But this time it goes about the national interest, national security, not only from each individual political party or the country, but the whole Europe in general. And I think a lot of you see political parties, including Hungary, across the Europe, trying to use this motto of peace, which we know actually is not really peace. It's a mouthpiece of Mr. Putin's war, trying to kind of separate EU members from each other and creating kind of confusion. It's an active measure of Russian history, which we know, and particularly I think it's kind of quite ironic that this happening with Hungary, because I mean the Hungary more than any other country have experienced occupation by Soviet Union, and 10,000s of Hungarians, men and women, paid their blood for uprising, for freedom. So it's a tough time, but it's not only I think in Hungary. We see a lot of political parties and across Europe, and I think later this year we will have the same debate here across Atlantic here in the United States as we're going through election in November.
Right, and it is highly ironic. Of course, there's no blame on the Russian side whatsoever. Now, Ralph, looking at Peter Magyar, his movement, the opposition that previously existed, what is your forecast for these upcoming elections? How much does Fidesz stand to lose, if much at all?
Well, first of all, my apologies. I feel vastly underdressed for this conversation. I hope you can forgive me. That being said, so I try to kind of make up for it with good content. No, I think what Victor Orban is doing is a kind of a shrewd electoral tactic. We know that in the past, all over Europe, participation in EU parliamentary elections has always been very low. So what Orban is trying to do is he tries to mobilize the base, because it's not just what people say in the polls. It's also important which people will go to actually vote. And the topic that he's talking about is resonating. We know that the topic about war and peace has resonated very strongly in the presidential elections and the parliamentary elections in Slovakia just a couple of months ago. So I think this is primarily driven by the idea to turn out the base. We'll see if it's going to work or not, but I would say this is an electoral strategy and not necessarily kind of a deep ideological commitment to Russia or anything else.
Right.
I would actually want to delve deeper into the opposition to Mr. Orban, to actually take a look at Peter Magyar, the lawyer husband of Orban's former justice minister, Judit Varga. So another question for you, Arash. Tell us, is there a chance that he actually will be able to take over and will stand chance next to Mr. Orban?
I think it's very difficult to predict because the entire election we saw in a lot of countries that a small fraction of political parties just in few months, and a good example of the Netherlands that just came out of the political party and created new political party and then won the election. But I think right now, as we discussed it before, is this topic of war and peace is kind of what confusing, and a lot of people have to make choice whether they are with or not. And we saw in the last couple demonstrations that Mr. Orban was able to mobilize a lot of people together with this kind of, in my opinion, kind of disinformation about this peace. But anyway, I think for Mr. Maguire has any numbers that he get, it will be quite amazingly to in a short time creating a party and then win election. But I'm think he's not able to win the total and defeat Mr. Orban. Also considering that a lot of government resources, the media control, a lot of things is still is decided by the Mr. Orban. And it's not only that, but 14 years being in a power that kind of create for you a base that you're much easier mobilizing people.
So Ralph, tell us, when we're looking at the shift, of the voters moving towards Mr. Magyar, what does that say about the landscape, the political landscape in Hungary, that we see this change taking place right in front of our very own eyes?
Well, I think we have to be very careful. I agree with everything the previous speaker said. I think these are excellent points. But of course, what we see, particularly in Hungary, is very often the only program the opposition party seems to have is that we are not Victor Orban. And that is usually not enough to win an election. By the way, we see the same in the Netherlands with Geert Wilders. We see the same in France with Marine Le Pen. We see the same in Germany with the AfD. So if the opposition or those who kind of want to defeat the incumbent can just say, look at us, we are not the other guy, that is not a convincing message. We know that the opposition to Fidesz is strong in certain urban areas, in certain areas of Budapest. The countryside, I would argue, is still solidly, for the most part, in the hands of Fidesz. There is a certain discontent, understandably, right, due to the economic issues. Inflation has been a problem in Hungary. I believe, as many, of course, know, that economic policy in Hungary was, let's say, during the aftermath of the pandemic and with inflation very often more driven by ideology and less by economic realism, price controls when it came to gasoline, price controls in supermarkets. These things never work. And of course, there's a little bit of backlash in that area as well. But at the moment, and what everyone thinks about this, I mean, I work for the MCC in Budapest, so I have a natural bias. I'm not making a secret out of this. But even if I would not have that bias, I think the idea that very early on or very soon in upcoming elections, there will be a shift in power, I think it's very unlikely, because the opposition, so far at least, was not able to make a convincing argument as to why they would govern Hungary significantly better than Fidesz at the moment. And one argument that was made, which I'm not entirely disagreeing with, but we have to be careful here. I mean, the idea that the Hungarian government is controlling media in a way, for example, as Putin is controlling the media in Russia, I mean, that is not entirely true. I mean, I work in Budapest. I can watch CNN. I can watch the BBC. I can get the New York Times. I can mingle with American NGOs who are directly and massively anti-Orban. So I would argue that the population in Hungary has no access to information that would be critical of the government. That's not entirely true. Mm-hmm. So at the moment, a lot of what is happening in Hungary is based on a certain popularity of the government. Will this decline over time? Absolutely, which is completely normal in a democracy, which Hungary is. But will there be a significant shift in power in the near future? I don't see it. Of course, I can be wrong.
Yes, I tend to agree with you. Definitely the people are in support of the ruling Fidesz party, and we don't have parliamentary elections there for another couple of years. So gentlemen, Arash Yaqin, national security analyst, and Ralph Schoellhammer, a visiting fellow at the MCC Budapest. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for your insight.
Thank you for joining
We appreciate
us.
it.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure is all ours.